Let's talk about the game at the weekend. So, pre-match last week, New Zealand had absolutely annihilated Australia, and there was a fear that these two teams are going in completely different trajectories. But then Australia pull off a shock defeat of the All Blacks. And actually, most of the analysis after the game isn't of how this happened. Most of the analysis after the game is of 2 red cards that happened in the first half. A lot of people won't have seen the red cards, and they won't have seen any of the reaction. So, essentially, they're for bad tackles that don't leave the opposition player badly injured. And so in the aftermath of the game, legends of the game in New Zealand are saying, this is ridiculous. There needs to be no red cards anymore in rugby. They remind me a little bit of some of those hurling fans who are like, let them flake away, who cares? What happened? What's your take on all this, Alan?
Well, let them flake away, and who cares? If people just listen to the previous piece there you did for Science Week, and the injuries and the concussions and probably the dangers of the game, I'm shocked, I must say. For me, Afa Tuingafasi, he got sent off for New Zealand. His tackle on Tom Wright was a red card. It was a high hit in the neck and head area with force. He was sent off maybe 15, 20 minutes into that game. And then right before half-time, Lachie Swinton, who was making his debut for Australia, was sent off for a tackle on Sam Whitelock. What really bemuses me and frustrates me, Ger, is the reaction of some of the legends of the game. So you, John Kirwan, Christian Cullen, 2 former All Black greats, incredible players, 2 great fellas as well, has to be said. And then you've got New Zealanders who comment afterwards. And then you have Tim Horn and Phil Kearns, 2 Australian legends. So you have 4 kind of stalwarts of the game who've achieved so much in the game, and the 4 of them are saying neither was a red card. And I'm just bemused looking at this. I think it's getting to the point now where people, they're looking to kind of looking for mitigating factors, and they're looking for, oh God, it's going to ruin the game. And what's going to ruin the game, Ger, for me, is one of these injuries is going to really seriously hurt somebody, and the force that they're putting them into it. And I just look at myself as a player, and I cannot understand why the modern day players are continuing. Now, we don't see it. Every time I watch a rugby game, I think there's possibly going to be a red card for somebody going high. Of course, there can always be accidental stuff, but I judge these tackles by the force that the tackling player puts into the tackle. And I've always said this: you've got to reduce the level of force to not put yourself in a position to potentially get a red card or a yellow card and hurt your team. Both those tackles on Saturday were very, very forceful. Thankfully, neither player in the receiving end got injured. But I'll take you back to 2018, the first test between New Zealand and France, and Afa Tuingafasi, the tight head prop. Sam Cane and himself tackled the French winger Remy Grosso coming off the side of a ruck. Sam Cane tackled him high first, and then Tuingafasa comes in from the side with incredible force, hits the guy into the side of the face, fractured his jaw and fractured his skull with the tackle. There was a penalty given against Sam Cane for a high tackle. That was it at the time. Both players were cited. Tuingafasa, and both of them just got a caution. Tuingafasa just got a caution after the game. So here's a guy who's the French winger who's lying in hospital because of this force. And Tuingafasa does something similar again because it's off the side of a ruck, and he comes in with this force. And if you were going to put that force into a tackle, you're at risk of, and people are always looking for mitigating factors and the player dropping down low. Well, if you don't put the force in it, tackle him with your chest, you know, and the professional players don't seem to learn. And what they forget at times, when John Kirwan, when Christian Cullen, when Phil Kearns, Tim Horn are talking about this stuff, it's not just in their own countries that people are looking at this. It's kids all over the world. This is on Sky Sports on Saturday morning. People can go onto YouTube and see it. And I just think it's a disgrace. And I'm really sick of these type of tackles and then people making excuses saying it's going to ruin the game. What's going to ruin the game is somebody gets seriously injured. And, you know, like, so we're trying to protect players. We're trying to manage player safety and player welfare. And I would say to any of the professional players throughout the world, take the force out of the tackle. You know, a shoulder can slip up a chest. players can dip, all that kind of stuff. But at least if the force is taken out of it, that will be looked at then as a mitigating factor. Look at Bundyaki's one last year against Samoa at the World Cup. He got a red card. There was no injury. There wasn't a huge amount of force in it, but he did lead a little bit forward with his shoulder. He had one against Italy in Dublin where it was looked at and there was absolutely no forward force. So if the force isn't there going forward with your shoulder, and I think players need to wrap players around the side of rucks. That was the Tuunga Fasa one. The Lackey Swinton one was, it's straight from a kickoff and he just piles in and hits Sam Whitelock high. It was a straight red and both of them were red cards. So you look at Sky Sports and you look at Michael Lina and Will Greenwood in the studio, and this is the contrast of the opinions from people, Ger. You look at Will Greenwood and Michael Lina in studio, and both of them are saying both are red cards. So how can we go from some players saying these are not even, like Justin Marshall in commentary said it's just a penalty. Well, if it's a penalty at all, why is it a penalty? If there's nothing there, it shouldn't be a penalty. So he makes contact with the neck and the chin area of the Australian player, Tom Wright. So I think this needs to be sorted out. And Joe Schmidt being on, working with World Rugby now, is putting together a panel of people to look at all these kind of things. And there needs to be, I think this is an area that really needs to be clarified going forward. And players and coaches have to take responsibility to this because, I was quite abrasive on the rugby field, but I don't know if I ever had a high tackle situation like that with a shoulder leading forward into a player's neck or head area. Like I say, it can always happen when players are dipping and you have a side-on tackle, you can get that seatbelt tackle around the neck. They're nothing more than a penalty unless there's force in it. The key here is force. Take the bloody force out of the tackle. And this is what needs to happen, not ex-players saying, oh, the game has gone soft. It's absolute rubbish. Somebody's going to get seriously injured. There was a player seriously injured here, a French player, Remy Grosso, in 2018. You should get him on and try and talk to him and ask him what his opinion is. Jack Prunell, the French coach there, was astounded by that tackle. You saw the tackle from Sam Kane on Robbie Henshaw in Dublin a number of years ago.
Yeah.
So it just has to stop. And ruining the game, it's not the game, the spectacle in itself. If the tackle doesn't have the force and it's accidental, the player won't be sent off. He'll probably get a yellow card for being a bit reckless. But when the force comes into it, you're straight away putting yourself in red card territory. So I'm not sure how many people saw that game. Go back and look at the tackles. I think they're 2 red cards, and the reaction afterwards is disgraceful for me from the 4 players who I had great time for. I like all of them, but I think it needs to be clarified, and this should be highlighted. World Rugby should come out and highlight this, that these tackles are not acceptable in rugby at any level. And if we see it at professional level, and then you have people who played the game that people look up to who are saying these are fine, well, you're getting complete mixed messages all the time. It has to be gotten rid of and protect the players. It's not about being hard here or being soft. This is about protecting a player in a very, very vulnerable area, your neck and your head area.
Yeah, no, 100%. Alan, great stuff. And we'll certainly send that clip out and talk to World Rugby and see if we can get somebody on from them and offer the lads a right of reply as well. So thanks a million. Definitely stoked some debate this morning here on OTB AM.